to overtime. Dwayne Wade right at the body of Anderson Varejao. Welcome to your Kodak moment, Anderson Varejao.
Doncic pulls up, three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Doncic wins the game at the buzzer!
And, you know, speaking of the East, there's the big question mark of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant coming back. The two of them coming back from injury on a team that is loaded with good players, with Karis LeVert, with Spencer Dinwiddie. You know, Joe Harris could be a sad loss in free agency, but if they manage to keep him, he's the player that any team wants. I would be more willing to give Joe Harris Buddy Hield's contract than actually giving Buddy Hield's contract. Not to crap on Buddy Hield, but Joe Harris is an all-around player that fits on any team and does more than just shoot, even though he is an incredible shooter. But the Nets really have questions because you have too many mouths to feed. So, and then on the other side of what is still a huge question mark coming into next season, you have the Clippers. Can Paul George really be a playoff performer? Can Kawhi Leonard go back to being, you know, what could have been the best player in the world? Can you get more out of players like Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, all of them? Can you refill the assets in terms of picks? And I mean, you have some young players that I like. Landry Shamet I really like, especially if he can get some of that ball handling ability back that he had at Wichita State. I'm a huge fan of Amir Coffey, even though, you know, most people haven't heard of him. The Minnesota Gopher, who I got to watch in my first game of the tournament last year. Fun player. Can do it all. Like, genuinely, I love him as a developmental 3-and-D wing. And I think he can be that. Terrace Mann, Rodney Magruder, both have some ball handling ability and play defense and can shoot the three. May not have the creation ability, but in terms of bringing the ball up and down the court, I think there's a lot to work with there. And those four young players, I really like. And I think they can become something. I would have rather had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander than any of them or any combination of two or three of them. But, you know, the Paul George trade brought you Kawhi Leonard as well. So that has to be accounted for. But now you're at risk at losing both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So what's the question mark there? What do you do? Well, I mean, you got to think about trading Paul George. And I was someone who, even before this playoff collapse, said, Lou Williams is a player that doesn't make your playoff team any better. He'll give you some scoring. He'll do all of that. And if you really need ball handling, he'll certainly give you that. But there's not an obscene amount of things he can do. And as far as defense goes, the Nuggets were picking on him. The Mavs were picking on him. Every team in the bubble was picking on him. And it got to the point where Patrick Beverley wasn't playing. Montrezl Harrell was awful. And when he wasn't playing, he was talking shit. And you can't be talking shit if you're playing bad. Like that's for sure. And you just didn't have any positive defenders out there outside of Kawhi Leonard. Like, Ivica Zubac is one of the more underrated players in the league. He's very good at defending the post and defending the rim. But if you get him to step out on the perimeter, it is genuinely dreadful to watch. Like, painful to watch. So I think Lou Williams needs to be out of there. I think you need to find something for Lou Will. Like, I don't know exactly what Lou Will could get you, especially after how bad he was. But I would find something for Lou Will. But that's not the more interesting thing we can talk about right now. The most interesting thing we can talk about is a Paul George trade. And the reason I brought up the Nets before is because I think the Nets are suited to find a third star this offseason. And I think the Clippers are suited to try and find a more balanced team. And I've been a huge fan of Karis LeVert for ages. I mean, look, I went as far as to say that I think Karis LeVert could end up being the second option on offense, or should end up being the second option on offense when Kevin Durant comes back. We still won't know if I'm right, but I've been a huge fan of Karis LeVert's. And I think some trade around Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, and maybe a sign and trade for Joe Harris, and if not, just tons of like a decent amount of first round picks. I think that works out for both teams pretty well too. I think the Nets get their third star. And look, we've seen PG can't be a first star in the playoffs. This past year, he can't be the second star in the playoffs. So let's try him at the third star. And as for relationships go on that team, we know that KD thinks that Paul George is one of the 10 best players in the league. We saw him slander Kawhi in favor of PG, whatever it was, 2 or 3 years ago. There's a lot to like about that fit there, of just adding more wings that can shoot and defend and create and do a lot of stuff for a team that's trying to claim its throne in New York, even though it will not. I want to restate that the Nets will never be the number one team in New York. Like, that's just not happening, but there you go. And on the Clippers side, you get, more youth. Spencer Dinwiddie is by no means young, but he is also one of the better six men in the league, and I think he can actually close the playoff game for you. I think he can actually play defense. He's a better shooter than his percentages show, because he takes so many off the dribble and so many hero shots. But there's a lot to be excited for there. And of course, the first round picks can be parlayed into other talent. I think you can bring back Marcus Morris. I think JaMychal Green is a better player than Marcus Morris, but this opens the door for bringing back Marcus Morris. And with more shots to go around, I'm pretty sure Morris will be happy. I think getting a sign and trade for Montrezl Harrell would be perfect. I think getting something from the Kings alongside Richaun Holmes, who I think is 85% of what Montrezl Harrell is, could be great. I think Landry Shamet taking a bigger role would be good. I think Patrick Beverley's value right now is the lowest it's ever been. And I don't think many teams want a player who's going to run around on the beach in Timbs on their team. But what value does he have? I think this team needs to be really reshuffled. This team was cocky from day one. They need to get players in there that haven't done anything. They need to get players who have not earned their credit yet. Paul George, people were, the whole MVPG thing last year. He earned his credit. He wasn't as hungry anymore. For him, it wasn't an all or nothing year, which it should have been. Every year should be an all or nothing year for a championship contender. And Paul George didn't make it that. And then, look, 3-time sixth man of the year, Lou Williams, or 4-time, or who cares? None of that matters when you can't defend anyone in the playoffs. He has his credit already. What does he care? He's won sixth man of the year so many times. He has respect in the NBA circles. Montrezl Harrell just got his respect by winning sixth man of the year in his circles, which first of all he didn't deserve, and second of all, I think he's overblowing the fact that you're not a star. You're a backup big who gets more pick and roll touches than just about anyone else in the league. So, have fun with that. Patrick Beverley was given credit as being one of the better defenders in the league last year when we weren't even sure of that. And he has turned that into being one of the most hated players in the NBA and being one of the most obnoxious sideline chatterers in the entire league. It's really bad. So I want to get players that really care in. I want to get players that are going to try their ass off night in, night out. And look, Kawhi Leonard, you can take some nights off, but it cannot be as many as it was last season. And you need to be in rhythm by the time the playoffs hit. And I know you had to do everything by yourself this playoff run. You still cannot blow a 3-1 lead. If they had lost in 5 to the Lakers in the conference finals, that would have been a better ending than blowing a 3-1 lead and losing in the semifinals again. Because at least you would have done something no one on the Clippers has ever done in reaching the conference finals. Instead, you've just added to the legacy of failure. So no, I'm not happy just running it back for the Clippers. I think there needs to be major shakeup. They started with Doc Rivers. That cannot be the end of it. You cannot say, hey, we fired our Hall of Fame coach. We're going to bring in Ty Lue, and then we're going to run it back. You can't do that. Nope. Can't do that. There's no way you can convince the fans and convince the fans of the league as a whole that you are a different team if you do that. Because say what you will about Doc Rivers and him not making adjustments, I still think he is better than Ty Lue. Ty Lue, who as soon as he lost LeBron, went 0-7 and got fired. I mean, sure, this roster has way more talent than that, but he's exactly what Doc Rivers is as a motivator without anything else. And at least Doc Rivers, you didn't have the offensive scheme, but at least I could trust him to do something creative with his players once in a while. And that means something. Creativity means a lot when it comes to coaching. And Doc Rivers didn't have that, and Ty Lue doesn't have that. Kenny Atkinson may not be the best at managing superstars. I think it works with Kawhi Leonard. I think Kawhi Leonard would manage to, work as a non-verbal superstar. And I think that offensive system would be great. But I think you have to preface it by going, the Paul George experiment just didn't work. And Kawhi Leonard, if we have your permission, we're going to go trade him now. And we're going to find you, something that could be a star moving forward. We're going to get back some more assets that we can reload because the best teams never don't have picks to move. The best teams are never stuck in cap hell. The Warriors, say what you will, managed to always fill in the team with new veterans, some of which would work out, and had the best four-man group in the NBA. The Raptors have managed to stay good because even when they move first-round picks, they find a way to use underrated young talent that they have on the roster and trade that for good pieces. The Spurs have not made a mid-season trade in years, and they made the playoffs for 20-something straight years. The best teams are never stuck, and the Clippers cannot allow themselves to get stuck. And if that means trading Paul George to keep movement going, you better get good value back, but you can do it. Would I even address a Kawhi Leonard trade? If you want your championship window to go out the window, sure. I don't think you do. There's a lot of directions the Clippers can go. And I am interested to see it, but I do not think not doing anything. I don't think apathy gets you anywhere. And that's in life and in sports. Apathy gets you nowhere.